Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06, almost 7:07 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, and it is a great Friday morning. Good morning, everybody. It's Patrice Onwuka. I'm here with Derek Hunter, one of our favorite guest co-hosts. Today, we're trying to fill Larry's shoes, Derek.
We're trying to. Your feet are a little bit too small. My feet are gigantic. So, I can get a hand in there. You probably get both your feet in there. But you know what? He's going to be using his shoes, walking his daughter down the aisle tomorrow out in California. So we won't mock his footwear.
Oh, all right. Well, let's get through the rundown at 7:35. We've got Ron Magill. He's the communications director for the Zoo of Miami. He's going to bring to us this challenge that is all the rave. I don't know. I'm not going to be part of it, but we'll see what he has to say. At 8:05, Reagan Reese, White House correspondent from the Daily Caller, will be joining us to talk news of the day. But kicking off this 7 a.m. hour, we have Charlie Spiering, senior political reporter for the Daily Mail and the author of Amateur Hour. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Patrice. Hi, Derek. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, let's just quickly, what's your take on yesterday's big news that Mike Waltz is moving over from the United to head up the UN to be the UN ambassador? What's your take on that whole story? And then we'll get into the good stuff for today.
Well, it certainly was a big moment for the administration. You know, the first sort of major staffing shuffle. We didn't see anything like the president's first term, so this was pretty unique. You know, Mike Waltz taking the job of UN ambassador and no longer serving as the national security advisor to the president. That's pretty big. That's a pretty big switch. I know the White House has tried to claim that it's some kind of promotion, but I think it's not. I think it's a demotion, and certainly signals a difference in foreign policy change over there.
Were there any indications, obviously Signalgate, there was a lot of pressure to do something to Walz once it was determined that it was his phone from which Jeffrey Goldberg was added to that chat, but the White House refused that. They pushed back against that. Is the thought that this is just a delayed reaction to that, or what?
Well, the sources I talked to say that, it is not just Signalgate. Obviously, if it wasn't for Signalgate, he might still have his job a little longer. But there were lots of people in the administration who didn't feel like he was a team player, who felt he was kind of out of his lane sometimes. And if you saw him on television, he certainly didn't have the best communication skills. Most famously, when Laura Ingraham on Fox News was trying to figure out, how he had Jeffrey Goldberg's contacts in his phone, he responded famously, well, it just gets sucked in there. And then that was kind of a disbelievable answer, and certainly struggled to deal with that controversy. So, yeah, I think his time was limited from that moment on.
Well, Charlie, to shift gears a little bit, you wrote the book Amateur Hour, Kamala Harris in the White House. And, your book couldn't be more timely because we've started to see former vice president and presidential candidate Kamala Harris resurface. I saw a clip of her. My husband and I laughed that she was dancing to this new fan dance. I will say she has more rhythm than I probably do. And then she's giving speeches again. So let's play this clip, and I'd love for you to respond to it. Clip 13.
Please allow me, friends, to digress for a moment. Okay. It's kind of dark in here, but I'm asking for a show of hands. Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago, the one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake?
Is she the gift that keeps on giving, Charlie?
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of demonstrates why, Caroline Leavitt at the White House is just like, yes, Kamala Harris, keep talking, keep reminding us what could have happened if you would have won the election. This story she shared about the elephant and about the elephants at the San Diego Zoo who circled around the most vulnerable during an earthquake. She saw that as the perfect metaphor of what Democrats should do under the first administration of President Donald Trump. Really kind of funny because, the elephant is a symbol of Republicans and not Democrats, but really shows that she has maybe a little too much time on her hands, and it kind of shows that, she does feel like it's time to get out there and make sure she's still part of the political conversation.
Yeah, her Speaker's Bureau schedule is wide open. You could probably get her for birthdays and bat mitzvahs this summer if you really wanted to. Charlie, one thing that always struck me about Kamala Harris is nobody finds Kamala Harris as funny as Kamala Harris does. And there's something disconcerting about an adult who can't get to the point because they think what they're about to say is so funny that they giggle about it. And you heard it there. She's chuckling about this analogy she's making that clearly she hadn't thought through. As somebody who's done more research on Kamala Harris than probably the Surgeon General would recommend anybody do, has she always been this way? Is this a nervous tic, or is this just her sense of humor?
Yeah, Derek, and you know more than as I do. The worst thing is a politician that laughs at their own joke before they're finished telling it, and she certainly has that problem. Yeah, it's definitely a nervous tic. There's many moments of when she's telling stories that she hopes people will find astonishing, amusing, and she'll just kind of do this artificial laugh and giggle right as she's talking about it, really trying to just trigger the crowd. It's a kind of a speaking tic she never really quite got over. But
nobody seems to have tried to. Look, my original major in college was theater, and one of the most difficult things to do while on stage is to figure out what to do with your hands when you're not doing anything. Do you put them in your pocket? When you're not conscious of it in real life. When you're on stage, you're conscious of it. She had staff whose specific job it was to make her palatable to the American public. This is not an endearing quality. It is a distraction from what she's trying to say, and I assume they worked with her on this, and it just doesn't seem to have taken.
Yeah, it just hasn't stuck, and it shows that she has staff who are not necessarily willing to criticize her or correct her. I think that's by design. I think she does not approve of anybody who shares, pretty sharp criticism for her and her speech. She really is sort of defiant when in the face of critics, really seeing it as a product of, oh, you don't like me because I'm a woman or because, I'm a woman of color. This is the kind of excuses that she'll make when audiences just don't respond to her and her jokes and her inspirational word salads.
Yeah. Well, we're speaking with Charlie Spiering, political reporter for the Daily Mail. In the last few moments we have with you, we saw President Trump's executive order ending federal funding to NPR and PBS. What is your take on this? Do you think that's going to be inconsequential to them, or is this going to be another resistance?
How long until the injunction comes in blocking that?
Such a good point, Derek. Then we all know that the judicial branch certainly loves their NPR and their PBS, so I see that coming pretty quickly. Very interesting that he signed and released this at 11:30 at night. Clearly, kind of one of these things that probably long talked about, ready to pull the trigger on. Seems like so that's strange that they would sign at 11:30 at night. I had a White House source text me the news right at 11:30. It's like, well, great, I'll retweet it, but wow, that's it's pretty sudden. So, and the other thing that strikes me is I think Congress is the one that sort of handles the funding. So I think that ultimately that decision lies in Congress. I don't know how much the president can affect funding NPR and PBS through an executive order. So obviously they're going to let the legal people figure out exactly how it's going to go down, but definitely a major change, something that conservatives have talked about for years.
I'm down for finding out if the president can do it on his own.
We all are. We're going to leave it right there.
Let's
Charlie
give it a
Spiering,
shot.
political reporter for the Daily Mail and author of Amateur Hour. Get it where books are sold. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
All right. It is 7:16 right now, WMAL.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Derek, if you hear that music, it's none other than time for Critter News. And boy, do we have a Critter News story for everybody here. In fact, our Critter News is so big, we had to bring in an expert. And at 7:35, we're going to have the communications director from the Miami Zoo here, Ron Magill, to talk to us about this story. And so let me set it up a little bit. There is this internet fight, brawl, whatever you want to call it, over whether 100 men could fight a gorilla. I didn't know this was a scientific question that people really are tackling right now, but then our federal tax dollars have supported some ridiculous research,
I believe this has gotten a $300,000 USAID grant as well as $2 million from the National Endowment for the Arts. So it's the social event of the season, the fight. UFC Dana White is already trying to book this thing in a cage match. Well,
good luck getting that gorilla and the 100 guys. I mean, I think I would like to see it. President Trump, I'm sure, will be in the front row if that
Could
were
men
to
win?
happen.
Who do you think? If you got $100, you got to bet on this fight. Which way are you going?
I'm going with the gorilla. I'll be honest.
100?
You just take a gorilla can just take one man and knock down a bunch of them, and knock down 10. The other 89 are going to run away. I mean, that's how quick you clear the ring.
If you just picked random men, 100 random men up at the mall and threw them in a room, then they would run away. But I'm assuming the 100 men are aware of what they're doing there. So it's not like what is this gorilla doing here? I'd assume it's not sprung on them. In that sense, unless they act like every karate movie or action movie where the guys, it's like 10 on 1, but everybody waits their turn. Like, no, you pile on. I have faith in the people who have thumbs and know how to use them rather than the creature that has thumbs and is kind of like smells it every once in a while going, what is this thing about? I believe that we could take a gorilla. I think you could probably do it with like 15 guys. That'd be the new name that guys. Tune. How many guys? If you gathered the guys together, there's the game show. You get to pick the guys. You outbid the other person in a reverse auction. If I think I could get 10 guys together who could beat up a gorilla, I think I could do it with 7 guys. And then, you win or lose money based on whether or not anybody survives.
Well,
a little morbid. It probably has to be on HBO.
This debate, folks, is why this has become a thing. So let's play cut 16. CNN has actually picked up on this, about this social media frenzy over how many people it would take. Could 100 guys take a gorilla? Let's play cut 16.
Who would win in a fight between 100 men and one gorilla? That hypothetical was revived in a post on X after the question was initially raised on Reddit 5 years ago. The latest post has more than 270 million views, and the debate has gone far beyond the confines of social media, with Elon Musk and Mr. Beast and Montana Senator Tim Sheehy weighing in as well.
Well,
we can take them. We can coordinate.
I don't think so.
We can coordinate.
Listen, in the words of Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Now, imagine when you get punched in the face by a gorilla. No,
look, you're working under the assumption that the gorilla is going to be like the Hulk in the first Avengers, where he picks up Loki and uses him as a weapon.
Yes,
I don't think a gorilla has that. I think a gorilla could be distracted by somebody sneaks a banana. Would a banana be like a performance-enhancing drug? If you pull a banana out of your pocket and throw it on the ground, is that a distraction to the monkey? I'm putting my $100 on human beings. I'm going to go with the higher life form.
I'm going with the gorilla. We're going to ask Ron Magill from the Zoo of Miami, who is an expert here, on his take. We'll see who he thinks is right. I'm looking forward to this discussion. Folks, stay with us. It's O'Connor and Company at 7:22. Okay, coming up, we have an expert, Ron Magill from the Miami Zoo, to weigh in on this debate. Can 100 men take one gorilla? All right, stay with us. It's O'Connor and Company at 7:30.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. WMAL. News now. Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
100 men versus one gorilla. Who's winning?
Where's the fight, first of all?
The 100 men.
Who are the 100 men? Let's get that in order.
You think 100 men is going to beat one gorilla?
Yes.
If the fight is a mandatory stay alive, I would go with the 100 men.
100 men?
100 men.
Do you know how big a gorilla is?
The gorilla going to get tired, and they're going to be coming from all directions.
It's going to be one gorilla knocking out 100 men. That's what it's going to be. And I promise you that. Once those knuckles hit the ground, bam.
All right, so that is the big debate. It is 737 WMAL News Talk 105.9. I'm here with Derek Hunter. It's Patrice Onwuka, and we've got a big debate right now exploding on social media about whether 100 men can take one gorilla. And Derek has said 100 men can. I have said no, the gorilla will win. Here to referee our own match is Ron Magill, Communications Director for the Zoo of Miami. Ron, welcome to our show.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, terrific. Well, I'm sure you're probably exhausted answering this question. Do you think that 100 men could fight a gorilla and win?
Well, you got to preface this by, first of all, saying how ridiculous this is to bring it up, because gorillas are gentle giants. They are not an aggressive animal. You know, a gorilla would only be aggressive to protect his family. This is not the King Kong of movies. A gorilla couldn't be any further from that. So people need to understand that.
Well, we're talking about a gorilla with an attitude. Maybe he was picked on in high school. The prepubescent years were not good.
Captivated and
scarred him
just
for
goes
life.
berserk.
Okay, putting aside that this animal, again, is a large, gentle giant that would never have this kind of conflict. Any gorilla seeing 100 men would just run away. But having said that, if you're just going to go strength and strength, the bottom line is no gorilla would be able to beat 100 men if the 100 men were committed, unified, and dedicated, coming in all at once. It's just it's a common sense thing. I mean, the gorilla can weigh between a gorilla can weigh between 400 and 500 pounds. You take an average man of 150 pounds. You take that times 100. You're talking about 15,000 pounds. That's a lot of that's a lot of weight. And if they come in committed, to the end.
And there are a lot of American men who weigh between 400 and 500 pounds too. So we could just throw them at
let's
them.
be real. They're going to be tumbling over. But listen, Ron, you said these have to be committed men. Do you not think that the first 10 would get mulled down, and the next maybe even 50 in the back are decide to back out? This is not a good idea. I mean,
yeah, no, you have a point. Yeah, you have a point there. No, my bottom line is that these men have to be committed, understanding that probably, the first line is going to be kamikazes.
Yes.
This gorilla can, and again, the gorilla wouldn't come out of aggressiveness. It would be strictly out of trying to defend itself. It's an incredibly powerful animal. Many times.
Yeah, this has to be like Thunderdome, where 2 men enter, 1 man leaves, as Tina Turner or Master Blaster, or it was, said in Thunderdome. But it said 100 men enter, and they don't get out unless somebody wins. That's if you just picked random 100 people off the bus stop. Yeah, I would see them running in fear for their lives. But if you say, hey, it's fight or flight, and you win something at the end, because I think ultimately, Ron, we're looking at the makings, the early stages, the brainstorming of a game show, I think. Probably for cable, maybe even for pay channels, depending on how the practices go. But
yeah, they've done this thing already on several of the cable channels. Who would win between a shark and a crocodile? Who would win between a lion and a tiger? This is all this premise of just proving that people have way too much time on their hands. The internet has just got a little bit insane.
As a society that produced 7 Sharknado movies, I resent that, and I loved every single one of them. Again, they were important, vital, critical moments of our culture. They're not a frivolous thing.
And again, I'm willing to play along, a little tongue-in-cheek here with this whole thing. But the main point to be made is that gorillas really are incredible animals. They're gentle giants. They would never be in this situation.
Okay, then let's go a little more aggressive. A hungry lion, a well-fed but hungry at the moment lion versus 12 guys from Idaho. Armed with potato. Like, is there an animal that you think could easily take a whole bunch of people, aside from like a tarantula sneaking up and biting everybody or something?
Well, since you're insisting on this conflict scenario, I don't think
you could say you could beat him at chess, but I don't think that's really a giant contest.
I know what you're saying. The bottom line is assuming that the men have no weapons. Of course, this is just mano a mano.
Right.
I don't think that there'd be any group of men that could take down an elephant. a rhino, even a hippo, some of the pachyderms. These are massive animals, incredibly powerful, and would not be subjected to inflicted injury from a human being in the form of a punch or a bite, just because of their thick skin. And again, I'm just playing along with this scenario, as ridiculous as it is.
I'm not going to accuse you. I don't want to. When we get arrested for our fight club against elephants and hippos in the future, when Patrice and I are sitting in court, we're going to go, Ron Magill put us up to this. He's down in Miami. Go get him. We'll totally turn state's evidence against Ron Magill.
Ron, let me save you here. Ron, let me save you here, because I'm looking at the website about you, and it seems like you're an animal enthusiast and that you want a grown appreciation and a respect for animals, which this fight club would absolutely
for the animals. I prefer them to our species, Patrice, but I'm a realist.
Listen, I prefer them dead on my plate. But that said, there are other people who love them. And so, Ron, talk to us about some of the efforts that you do personally or through the Miami Zoo to foster that appreciation for animals. Win me over.
We just try to educate people about, get away to these. If people look at gorillas, they think of King Kong. There's no gorilla that's going to climb the Empire State Building and grab planes out of the air. These are gentle giants. They're vegetarians. They don't even eat meat, for Pete's sake. I've been privileged to be side by side with them in the wild and just in awe of how gentle, how committed they are to the family. These are amazing animals. So I understand. Listen, again, I think extremism in any form is dangerous. So I'll play tongue-in-cheek along with this, as long as people understand it's tongue-in-cheek. And hopefully it affords a platform to make people understand, hey, I never knew gorillas were vegetarians. I never thought gorillas were gentle giants. So hopefully through this ridiculousness of this platform, we're also educating some people and getting to care. That's all.
All right. Well, you've gotten me to care.
A donation has been made in the name of Harambe to the...
There you go.
Ron, thank you so much for being a good sport with us this morning. And folks, if you're in Miami, it sounds like go down and check out the Miami Zoo and learn more about what you guys do there. Thanks, Ron Magill, Communications Director of Miami Zoo.
Always.
All right, it is 7:44. All right, Derek, I still don't think that our feud over the gorillas versus men are over, but that's okay. We were going to put a pin in it because we have another.
People who eat ham hocks and all sorts of gross things too. You're free to be wrong. Okay. All right. We're going to talk offline about this, but we have another critter news stories, which I know will unite us in absolute disgust for Democrats. Not every Democrat, but at least one Democratic congressman, Mr. Sri Thanadar, I believe I pronounced his name correctly. Thanadar.
He railed against President. Say that again, please.
Thanadar, thank you. He railed against President Trump, and it turns out that he has some bones in his closet or in his backyard. Let's see here. Do we have a little clip? Let's play cut 21.
This is Congressman Sri Thanadar. Donald Trump has already done real damage to our democracy, but defying a unanimous 9-0 Supreme Court ruling, that has to be the final straw. It's time we impeach Donald J. Trump.
All right, that's enough of that guy. Because he's worried about impeaching President Trump, yet in his own backyard, you won't believe the unspeakable acts he carried out against, get this, Derek, 118 beagles. Dogs we're talking about here.
Animal cruelty makes me sick. I always wondered what happened to the guy in Raiders of the Lost Ark who discovered that on the other side of the little amulet that told you where the Ark was hidden, did you take two back? But I wondered what happened to him. There he is. He's been elected to Congress. And I used to live in his district. The district
really?
he represents. I escaped in a hot air balloon to Canada before he ever took power, so I was lucky there. But, yeah, he's a piece of garbage. When the Huffington Post is going after a liberal, you know that liberal has done something that is just objectionable. He had a company that did animal testing. It went out of business, and he just left these animals in cages. Not even the chance of escaping. He left them locked in cages and abandoned the building. If it weren't for staff sneaking in and breaking into their old employer and taking care of them until the authorities were able to come and get them, they would have all starved to death, which is a level of unbelievable cruelty. And his indifference towards that, it wasn't like, oh, geez, I forgot about that. He's defending it. He doesn't even just defend it. He deflects the concept. That's what's most disgusting about it. Like, well, they weren't. They were starving to death, dude. You did this.
It's sick. It's sick. So he's been accused of abandoning 100 dogs to starve to death, as you rightly said, after his company had cruelly been testing pharmaceuticals on them. So this is a double dose of cruelty to animals here. He had a test. He had a testing lab that was shut down in 2010. And it apparently didn't do a good job. It went bankrupt. And then, unfortunately, local animal rights activists alerted authorities to the 118 beagles that had been left in the facility. This is what's interesting here. An unnamed woman told the Times Herald Record, quote, "We believe that they have never even been outside ever. I don't think they've ever actually had paws on the ground. When I walked in here, it looked like they were walking on eggshells. They were afraid to even walk on the grass." This is just despicable. As you rightly said here, the representative told the Daily Mail on Thursday, quote, "These attacks are completely false and have been repeatedly litigated. When the lab was closed, all of the animals were given to happy homes. In my long business career, I am proud to report that no animal
broke into
hurt
his
or
property
died."
and planted 112 animals in cages as a
Yeah.
weird, sick prank, and he should be trying to get to the bottom of that, because these animals were taken out of there. If they were put into safe homes, then they have somehow been cloned, or there's alien technology transporting them in there, or this guy is a liar. There's really no other option.
Well, and he's a member of Congress, so not all of them are, but I'm going to lean towards your latter suggestion here. This is despicable. We'll continue to track what happens with this case, but listen, I am not an animal lover. Folks know I even just said it. The only animals I like are dead on my plate. But that said, I am not into animal cruelty. I'm not into just mistreating animals, even if I'm not interested in them. And apparently this member of Congress does. It is 7:53.